Well, Ash, asset sales were widely expected to dominate this budget, and we had confirmation of that today. More than $33 billion worth of public assets could be sold, leased or offered for private investment in a bid to get Queensland back into the black. Now, if the Newman government gets its way, the proceeds of those transactions, about 3/4 of the proceeds or $25 billion, will be used to pay down the state's $80 billion in debt. The remaining $8 billion in proceeds from those transactions would be put into an infrastructure fund, which would be established to build new schools, new hospitals and new roads. So we did see that being really the centrepiece of today's budget, this draft plan, which is the result of a $6 million advertising campaign and months of public consultation. Now, the assets that are on the chopping block in terms of being up for sale include the retail business of Ergon Energy, the commercial component of Sunwater and 2 power generators. Treasurer Tim Nichols today said that there's plenty of interest in the market for these types of assets. Take a listen.
Market evidence is that there is a large appetite and a large hunger for these sorts of assets. We've seen figures of 27 times earnings for the Port of Newcastle. We saw 20 plus times earnings for the Port of Sydney. Here in Queensland, the sale of Queensland Motorways saw 27 to 28 times earnings. So we know that there is a strong desire for these types of assets. Just exactly where that will land is something that we would only test when we went to market.
So the Queensland government says that Queenslanders will get a chance to vote on whether these assets are sold or leased at the next state election, which is likely to be in March. But we've already heard some angry reaction to this proposal, particularly from the Electrical Trades Union. Have a listen to what they had to say.
Likely to be significant job losses. We've seen 1,712 jobs ripped out of the electricity industry since the LNP came to power. You cannot take 1,712 electricity workers out of the industry and not have significant impact on services. The business community has also raised concerns today about potential privatisation and the impacts not only on electricity prices but also on services. That would be based on previous experience in Victoria and South Australia, which saw after following privatisation, electricity prices skyrocket and a significant reduction in services and reliability of the electricity network.
As promised, we've seen no new taxes or cuts to services announced, but the federal government impact on this budget was front and centre today. We did hear the Treasurer really blaming the federal government in terms of the cuts made to concessions in the healthcare sector and early childhood in particular, and also to pensioners, which will see concessions for seniors such as water, gas and electricity rebates cut, unfortunately. But the Queensland government says that it's not them that should be blamed for this, it is the federal government. Have a listen to the Treasurer.
While we've been able to increase our component of it, and we've done that to 9.9%, while we've been able to continue to maintain our concessions, we have not been able to absorb the full impact of the cuts that have been made by the federal government. And I simply say to those people who are affected by those cuts, if they can convince their local federal member to convince the federal government to reverse that decision, then those concessions will be fully funded.
So while we saw a $2.3 billion deficit unveiled today, the government maintains that we will see a surplus of around $1 billion in 2015-16, but that will likely depend on whether the government can get public approval for these asset sales, Ash.